I'm Lisa Stone, and you are listening to Season 8 of Parenting Aces.
Welcome to the Parenting Aces podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Stone, and I am coming at you from the lobby of the Tournament Hotel at the BB&T Atlanta Open. I am sitting here recording this podcast and watching all of the tournament players walk past me. It has been really fun. So I apologize for some of the ambient noise you're hearing in the background, but that's just kind of where things led this week. And it's been a great week out here at the BB&T Atlanta Open. Ryan Harrison just walked in. I'm like in awe this week. It's been so fun. Anyway, this week's episode, I talked to Jimmy Bendeck, and Jimmy is a former standout at Baylor, former junior player who, as it turns out, my son actually played at national clay courts their last year, the 18s. But Jimmy recently just announced that he is going to pursue a professional career in tennis. And so I thought it would be really fun to have him on the podcast to talk to all of you about his junior development, about his years at Baylor, and about his decision to turn pro, what has gone into that decision, and what he is looking to achieve on the pro tour. So I will, sorry, I'm so distracted. I'm just like looking around and players everywhere. Anyway, I will let you sit back and relax and enjoy this week's podcast with Jimmy Bendeck. Thank you for joining us, Jimmy Bendeck, on the Parenting Aces podcast. I'm so happy to have you.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, so I would love to have you share your junior tennis adventures with the Parenting Aces audience. Just kind of give us a little info on what your training looked like, how you got started in the sport, and who your coaches were.
Yeah, so I actually started playing tennis when I was around 7 years old. My dad had played tennis, so I'd been around it a little bit. But really, one day I saw it on TV, and I was like, "Hey, Mom, this is what I want to do with my life." And she kind of gave me a funny look, and I was like, "Well, if we're gonna do this, you have to do it 100%." Because I had quit piano before, I had quit another sport, and she was like, she was trying to teach me a lesson, kind of thing. And I started playing tennis at 7. I started getting really serious when I first started with my coach, who's been my lifelong coach, Chris Hunt, at around 8 years old. And I actually had a pretty good start. As a kid, I was doing really well. I won my first 14th tournament when I was 8, my first 16th tournament when I was 10, and my first 18th tournament when I was 12. So it's kind of called policy. And this was all with my coach, Chris Hunt. And then when I was around 12 years old, I actually dislocated my shoulder, right after the best term I ever had, which was the 14th National Open. And I basically went through a 3.5, 4-year recovery process that basically consisted of 2 surgeries, a cortisone shot, and a lot of time in physical therapy. After that, I started playing again. I got a little bit ahead in school, and my coach was like, "Hey, look, you got to keep trying. You got to keep trying." And obviously, there's a lot of battles in those 4 years of whether I should continue playing tennis. He kind of convinced me. He says, "Hey, you got to at least give it a shot. Play high level D1 tennis," and basically worked my butt off the next 2 years to eventually play at Baylor. In a
Fantastic.
My junior career.
Yeah. So I want to just ask you, you said you started playing when you were 7. What did that look like in terms of how many days a week, how many hours a day?
Yeah, I mean, when I was 7, I went to normal school, and we'd actually start playing at my coach would drive down. We'd play at 6 a.m., probably from 6 to 7:30, and then I'd go to school. And that kind of would be my day of tennis, and maybe sometimes I'd play in the afternoon. But really, I started getting serious when I was 9. I started homeschooling, and they were kind of full days, right? I'd wake up in the morning. I'd spend 3 hours with my coach in the morning, not necessarily playing tennis the whole time, but at least around the sport. Usually we'd go eat something, and I'd do school for 2 or 3 hours, and then we'd do something short or some sort of fitness in the afternoon. Never too much tennis necessarily, but full days at least around tennis. That's for sure. But,
and
and that kind of continued until I was 12. Yeah.
Okay. And so, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but when you say that you homeschooled, was it a situation where one of your parents was teaching you? Were you doing virtual school or a combination of the two?
Yeah, it was actually my coach, my tennis coach, who was teaching me. You know, he actually, his name is Chris Hunt. I had a really good personal relationship with him, and he put a lot into me, more than just as a tennis player. He was really a second dad to me. And he really raised me for who I am today more than anyone in my life. So definitely, he taught me basically everything I know.
Wow. That's amazing. Yeah. And you grew up in Florida, right?
I did. Yeah.
Okay. And so, I mean, the weather in Florida is very conducive to training full time and all that. You know, it's a great place to grow up if you want to be a tennis player. So sure. Did you grow up playing mostly on clay courts, or did you combine that with hard courts?
Yeah, so we actually, I basically played with my coach in a private park, or not a private park, a public park in Pompano Beach, Florida, and we kind of just we'd play there, you know, 3-4 hours a day, and there were hard courts there, and obviously we'd try to get on clay whenever I'd be playing a clay court tournament. It'd obviously be based on you know, what the circumstance was for that weekend and what would help me be best prepared. And we would usually find clay courts either in Pompano or we'd go to Boca Raton, depending on where we practice.
Gotcha. And did you ever have a time where you felt like, gosh, I'm giving up so much for this tennis thing that I mean, especially when you were dealing with your injury and recovering from that injury, you know, where I assume you still continued to homeschool during that period. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, there's many conversations, obviously with my family, and just with myself about, hey, should I continue doing this? Especially, during those times where I was hurt. You know, I was this kid who, you know, had potential to be pro, and be a really successful pro from the results I had. And then I kind of had like a almost career-ending injury, and it took 4 years to truly recover from it. And even after those 4 years, you know, I still suffered some pain and still had a lot to go through with the injury. But yeah, there's a lot of debate whether I should quit or whether I should keep going. And I think in the end, it was, you know, the love for the sport of tennis and doing, you know, being successful there, but also, you know, hey, like I also want to at least play in a D1 school and have a chance to win a national championship and have a chance to win a, you know, conference championship. And, you know, my coach kept that dream alive for me. And you know, thanks to him, I continued believing that I had the opportunity to do that.
That's great. I think, you know, dealing with injury, especially as a young player, can be not just physically debilitating, but mentally, you know, to have that disappointment, especially as you said, you were coming off one of the best tournaments of your life at that point, and you were still a little kid, you know, when the injury happened. But still, I mean, you're on a high from winning a great event, and then to have to take a step back and deal with, you know, the pain of the injury, but also I would think the frustration of, gosh, you know, all I want to do is play tennis, and here I am laid up trying to recover from this stupid injury.
Yeah. I mean, it was definitely, I think obviously the toughest thing, you know, when I was, you know, from 12 to 16 was just seeing all these guys that, you know, I had beaten or competed with, you know, who are, you know, winning Junior Orange Bowl, who are getting their first point at 15 years old, you know, first ATP point at 15 years old. And, you know, I hadn't touched a tennis racket in 3 years at that time, you know, and I'm just sitting there thinking, you know, oh, well, what if that could have been me? And, you know, it was definitely even to the point where after I came back, I still like, you know, I didn't have confidence because of this whole fact that I didn't play. And really it was, you know, one day my coach kind of, you know, looked at me and was like, hey, you know, like this is the cards that were dealt to you. You know, you got to do the best you can with them. And honestly, with his help, I was able to get mentally in the state, start believing myself, and realize that, I have a pretty good life. I'm really thankful for it, and there's a lot worse things that can happen than not being able to play tennis for 4 years. So
Sure. And was there ever a point where your parents just said, "Look, it's just not worth it. Let's switch gears here"?
Yeah, I mean, I think they definitely, they talked about it a lot. At what point was it not going to be worth it? But one of the things that one, I have amazing parents who have supported me every step of the way and who believe in whatever I want to accomplish. So I'm really lucky in that aspect. But also, I had the rest of my life in mind. I was doing really well in school. In the homeschooling I was doing, I would take the standardized test, and I would test in the 98th percentile. I was getting my work done. It wasn't like I was just sitting around doing nothing. I was trying to maximize my time the best I could, especially when I was around my coach and he was helping me. We would watch videos about tennis. We'd do everything we can to have me learn, but also, I was doing pretty well in school, so it was like, hey, look, I'm still trying to follow my dream, and I'm accomplishing everything else that I need to, that you guys want me to accomplish to check the box. So I think because of that, they continued, entrusting in me that this was the right decision.
Right. How did you use that injury, or how have you used that injury moving forward to kind of inform your pathway and your actions now that you're back healthy and playing?
I think early on it was just, I was just thankful to be around the game, right? Because when you don't have a chance to play for 4 years and you really love the sport and it was kind of your life, what happens is you get on the court and you're just happy to be on the court, and a lot of tennis players, and I felt this midway through college, we find ourselves and we're kind of sick of it, and, I spent 2 years training basically from 16 to 18 years old, having a 24-hour day based on tennis and based on how do I get myself to be to the level of college, D1 college tennis. And I was training extremely hard. And I think what allowed me to do that was I enjoyed it because I knew that, I didn't have tennis for 4 years and now I had it and I'm making the most of it. But also just, in the end, I still had an amazing life. I still had amazing parents. I still had an amazing coach and amazing relationships. And, I think that helped me separate, and help understand how much tennis really matters in my life and what's the most important part of tennis to me, which is,
right,
the process and the journey that I got to experience with my coach, and my family and the team of people that were around us, when I was playing tennis.
Well, it's so funny because I was going to ask you about burnout and the fact that you had this 4 years away from the court. I suspect during that 4-year period, you saw some of your peers dropping out of the sport due to burnout.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of people who, in the end, I don't want to go out there and be a sad tennis player, who gets angry every day. And obviously, everyone faces times where they're going to feel burnt out. I felt that many times in my career in college because the college season's super long and tiring. But I think it made it a lot easier for me because I had all this time that I didn't play tennis. So the hardest and I've ever worked was right after I had this time back. Right, was because I had this opportunity and I knew that I didn't take it for granted. I didn't take every day on the court for granted. And right. I think that really helped me improve really fast when I wasn't, when I was finally healthy again.
One of the interesting takeaways from all of this, Jimmy, is the fact that you did take 4 years away from tennis and were able to get back to the highest level so that you were recruitable by the best schools in the country. And I think this is a really important thing for parents to hear, that it's okay if your kid needs a break or wants a break from the sport, as long as everybody's on board with what's going to happen during that break, right? And that just because you take a break doesn't mean your tennis career is over and done with. There's still lots of opportunity to get back and, train even harder maybe because your mind is in the right place and because maybe you want it more at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think, it was definitely, I completely agree with that. I think that for me, I think that, finding the right amount of training has been really important. And that's something I'm constantly working on because of injury, because of, mental burnout, et cetera. And I think my coach did an unbelievable job, over the 2 years that we had, where I could really train, managing all that, right. And making sure that I was in the right mindset every single day before practice started, and making sure he talked to me about, what the plan was and what we were doing and why we were doing it. And, obviously it's not always easy, right? There's many times where we fell into tough times, and where there were days where I didn't want to wake up and play, or days where I just wanted to stop and be like, hey, like, I feel burnt out. But, my coach did a really good job of making sure that everything was planned and organized. And, he gave me a lot of ownership in it, in the way he did things, because he would always explain and rationalize why we were doing what we were doing. And it made it a lot easier. It made the process a lot easier, and it also, gave me a lot of freedom to just worry about, tennis, which
Right.
makes life really easy.
Right. Well, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about your college recruiting, because you, I would guess, were in a pretty unique position when it came time to start reaching out to schools, or for schools to start reaching out to you, in that you had this big gap in your results. And so did you find yourself having to explain that to coaches, or how did that work?
Oh yeah. So this is a very interesting story. So obviously when I was 16, I had no rankings. On tennisrecruiting.net, I think after the first 6 months I had been playing again, I was 256, when I was about to turn 17. So that's obviously like a whole different recruiting range that I ended up in. And then about 6 months later, I was top 50. I was a 5-star, and then I was kind of getting, I won an ITF in Puerto Rico, and beat some people there pretty soundly, some really good players, and find myself in a good position. But, originally before this happened, I had to email all the coaches myself. It was kind of a thing that, my coach and my mom, we put together something to email basically the coaches of the schools that I thought, or that we thought would be, national championship caliber schools, and we reached out to them, right? And obviously at the time, my results, I was a tennis player, and my results were getting better. But I wasn't like this hot shot recruit, right? And that was obviously really difficult. And as I started getting better results, I started narrowing down the schools, and schools became more interested in me. But it wasn't like, I didn't feel like I was this recruit that people were really reaching out for, right? There's a couple schools that really tried hard, and there were like a couple mid-major schools. And then honestly, Wake Forest was one that had recruited me from the very beginning. But other than that, it was kind of me reaching out, and coaches kind of discovering through, me reaching out. So that was kind of the path. And then,
Mm-hmm.
you want me to name the schools I talked to, or?
Yeah, I'd love to. I mean, I think it's interesting to hear where you looked.
Yeah, so I looked at, the big four that I was looking at to start were, Boise State, Duke, Wake Forest, and Illinois. Illinois was always a big favorite for me from the time I was basically 9 years old. My coach's nephew, Ryan Rowe, played there. Won a national championship in doubles with Kevin Anderson. He was an All-American there, and he's one of my best friends. He's like a brother to me, and so I wanted to kind of live his legacy. And obviously Duke, and Wake was growing. They had recruited me from the beginning. Duke is obviously a great program, and then Boise State, Coach Patton, I think is an amazing person, and honestly getting to learn from him even through the recruiting process was an amazing experience. So honestly, there's a lot of good choices, and I actually ended up committing to Wake Forest. I think late October of my senior year. So this is like the year before I'm supposed to go to college. And then we thought it was a done deal, and I was going to get to go. And then, we were having troubles with admissions, but it seemed to be going fine. And then about 5 months into being committed, or 4 months into being committed, basically we basically figured out that I probably wasn't going to get into the school. and to be honest, I don't know the exact details of why, but had something to do with the homeschooling program that I did.
Mm-hmm.
And then basically it's kind of a tough experience, right? Because I'd gone through all this. I found a school, found a coach and a program that we thought had a lot of potential, and obviously, Wake Forest has done an incredible job. They won 2 years ago, and they won last year, and they got to the finals this year. So, we had the right thoughts in mind that this is going to be one of the best programs in the country, but unfortunately, it didn't work out.
And so let me interrupt you 1 second. So when you say that you committed to them in October, that was a verbal commitment at that point, right? Because you can't sign. You can't sign the NLI. Just clarifying for the audience, you can't sign the NLI until November. So it's a verbal commitment, but those verbal commitments can be binding, and sometimes they are not binding. The school can change its mind, and the player can change his mind. And I mean, unfortunately for you in that situation, it was an admissions issue, and I mean that just stinks. I can't imagine how disappointed you were feeling at that point.
Yeah, it was. I kind of felt, when I found out, it was obviously a really tough. It was a really tough day, because I worked so hard to get to this moment. We finally felt secure. The recruiting process we took really seriously, and we felt like we had the right school, the right program, the right coach, and obviously it didn't work out. It was really unfortunate at the time, right? And then
right. In the moment, it's the worst thing ever, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, in the moment, it seemed like it was the biggest thing that's ever happened in my life.
Right.
Right. Especially, and it was just, recruiting is stressful. So, it was, when we had relief after it was over, it was amazing. And then, come to find out that I might not be going to school in the fall. Right. So
how did you regroup from that?
It was kind of one of these things. So because, it was after the time of like, you can send the applications. I didn't have any public schools as an option, or at least I don't think I had public schools as an option after I basically decommitted from Wake Forest and didn't get in. And then really what happened was my coach was like, look, Baylor's the next best option. Let's, as crazy as it sounds, we shot some videos of me playing tennis in practice, made a bio, and the next day we sent it to Coach Knoll at Baylor. And I think within the next week and a half, I visited them. I got to go to the match where they were number 2 in the country. Oklahoma was number 1. Wall Street Journal did a special on the match. It was like one of the most amazing, I think it is still the most amazing college tennis match I've ever seen. And then the next week I was committed to Bendeck. So
wow.
It was a pretty crazy turnaround. And I'm really thankful for it, right? I think it all worked out in my favor, because Baylor's been an incredible school to be a part of. But crazy recruiting experience, definitely stressful, especially for my family, obviously, because they were supporting me the whole way.
Sure.
It was a really good, really, really interesting experience.
So let me ask you a question about Baylor, because you committed under Coach Knoll, and then he left partway through your college career, and you had a new coach, and Coach Bolin. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, well, first I like to say how lucky I am. I got to learn from 2 national championship coaches, right? That's not very many people get to do that anywhere, right? I got to do it as a player from 2 coaches, and obviously the transition's super hard. We had one way of doing things the first 3 years, and then now there's a completely way of doing things with Coach Bolin. I think we kind of lucked out. We got one of the best coaches in the country, if not the best coach in the country, with Brian. He's an incredible person, and I thought he did an unbelievable job when he came in to really make us all feel comfortable with who he was and what mattered most to him. And honestly, at first, I think I had a lot of trouble adjusting because it's just something new, and I'm kind of this feisty, talk. I like to talk back kind of guy, and it took me a little bit to learn, but honestly,
I can imagine that didn't go over so well with Coach Bolin.
Yeah, but it was a really good experience just because it was a new system, but it was a system that works, and I 100% believe in and bought into. And obviously we had really good results last year, I think a lot of that had to do with the transition and how good of a job Coach Boland did coming into here at Baylor. And I mean, don't quote me on this, but I think we're going to win some national championships pretty soon here at Baylor. So,
Well,
if we don't this year, we'll win one next year.
Okay, you're on the hook now because I'm not going to quote you, but you just said it. So, so at what point did you realize? And I know you said from a young age you said you wanted to be a professional player, but I would suspect, having gone through the 4 years away from the game, maybe that came into question a bit, even though the goal of playing for a top college program was still viable for you. But at what point in your college career did you realize, hey, wait a minute, maybe this dream of becoming a professional is still alive and viable for me?
Yeah, I mean, I guess to tell you a story. So going into midway through my junior year, in February, I actually fractured. I had a stress fracture in my left femur, and that took me out for the season. Yeah, and I got almost healthy by the time NCAA started. I was healthy enough to probably be in the doubles lineup. Didn't really make the doubles lineup, so that was really tough for me because I thought I was really good at doubles. But obviously I hadn't played a match in a long time, so it made sense from a coach's perspective. And then I went to New York all summer. I played Davis Cup about a week after the season ended, and that was an awesome experience. And I went to New York for an internship all summer. And I touched a tennis racket one time in 10 weeks. So my mind was, hey, like, where am I going to take my finance career? And I was applying for full-time jobs all fall, and I was working really hard to find a job, and everyone, that was kind of what my life was about. And, I wasn't sleeping very much because I was trying to keep up with tennis, and I promised Coach Boland that I would give everything I could to tennis. And then, yeah, basically the first time we ever joked about it, I ever joked about going pro, and since I was younger, I was in the car on the way to All-Americans with Michael Woodson, our assistant coach, and I said, if I'm top 5 in either singles or doubles, I'll play pro for 6 months, and obviously I said that as a joke, thinking like that's never going to happen. There's no indication. I haven't really played in 5-6 months. There's nothing that'll show that. We ended up winning All-Americans, and then I still thought it was a joke, but Mike was like, well, now you got to play pro, and I'm like, I'm not going to play pro. And then about 3.5 months ago, we continued doing really well in doubles, and it kind of became one of those things where it wasn't just a coincidence that we were ranked really high. It was, we had legitimate results. We built a record that was, where I believed it would be realistic to believe that I can make it in the pro tour. And then, do some talk with my parents and Coach Boland and Michael Woodson and Isaac Vandermeer. They said, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. You only get to play pro once in your life, and it's now. So you should definitely consider giving it a shot. And yeah, here I am giving it a shot. It was more, for me, I don't want to be a player who goes out there and is delusional about, what I can and can't do on the pro tour. I don't want to sit there, 3-4 years at 500. I want to be able to be, every year be improving and getting closer to becoming, a top 100, top 50 pro, in this case doubles, and hopefully top 10, right? And I believe that my record this past year on the doubles court, was.
And so is your Baylor doubles partner also going to go out on tour with you?
So he's going to be a junior this year. But yeah, so hopefully afterwards he will. I'm pretty sure he's going to play pro tennis, and I'm also pretty positive he's going to be extremely successful as well. So I definitely think in 2 years we'll be joining up again, and I think that's the plan. Hopefully that's the plan in his mind, but it's definitely the plan in my mind.
And so who will you play with to start out, or who are you playing with?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think early on it's going to depend tournament by tournament. depending on who's playing it, what the person's schedule is, and obviously like whether we, how close we are as friends, whether our games help each other out. I'm going to try my best to play with Sven. Sven Law, that was the doubles partner I had here at Baylor, in the bigger tournaments, right? And see if he'd be willing to travel out and play with me. And I think that's most likely going to happen, just because obviously that's going to be a really good opportunity for me and him both to get better. So, yeah, we'll see. I mean, it depends on tournament by tournament, but I'm going to try my best to obviously find the best partner I can to win each tournament. I mean, that's in the end, that's the goal, right? So, find someone that matches well with me. And honestly, it's really tough early on in the pro tour from what I'm discovering. It's tournament by tournament. Some people pull out, some people, get injured. So you don't really know until, either a week or a couple days before, and sometimes the day of the tournament, who you're going to be playing with, especially in the futures level.
Right. Right. And so will you have a coach with you? Because I know it's very difficult financially to make that happen at the beginning.
So yeah, early on, I'm not, right? I'm not going to have a coach at all. I'm going to be traveling kind of alone. But I think, I think doubles is a little bit easier than singles in this way. Obviously, I'm going to be playing some singles as well. But doubles, I have a basic understanding of what I like to do in doubles, and it's a little bit more simple. And it's a little bit easier to work on. I think that's part of the reason, one, that I'm good at it, because it's a mental game. I think it's a mental game in the sense of strategy. The strategy is more simple. So I think coaches aren't really quite as necessary as they are in doubles. But obviously, as I become more successful, I'd like to have someone travel with me. I think it makes life a lot easier. And I think, having a coach there always makes a huge difference. So, in the short run, obviously financially, I won't be able to afford to have a coach, but hopefully if, one day I make it top 50, top 20, I'd love to have a coach travel with me.
And I mean, have you given thought to the stresses involved in traveling alone on the tour? Because I've interviewed several young professional players over the years, and one of the biggest challenges that they talk about is that feeling of being there by yourself and having to deal with where you're going to stay and how you're going to get there, and your schedule and what you're going to eat, and God forbid you get sick or injured, how to deal with that. How do you plan for that as a young professional player?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is probably my biggest concern of being a professional tennis player is exactly this, right? Because I love being around my team of people. It's something that I've learned to love in college, and something I grew up with having a coach who loved and cared about me, and who I relied on. But I guess, and I had this conversation the other day. What makes it easy is, there's all these people. I'm lucky. I have all these people who are supporting me, right? If you look at the Make a Champ campaign, which is the crowd fundraiser I started, there's a lot of people who put donations in because they believe in me and my dream, right? And I have a team of people here at Baylor who believe in my dream and who trust me. And I have parents and family and coaches and a girlfriend and friends who all really care and who want me to do the best I can, and who really put a lot of time and effort into me. And so with those people putting that time and effort, when I'm having a bad day, I have it written on the screenshot. Or I have it written on my phone. Remember all the people who help you, right? Because that's the easiest motivation, especially in the toughest times. So it's helped me a lot in the last couple of weeks, and I think hopefully when I'm traveling a lot, I can just think, all these people are there to help you. Just keep going. Just keep trying, and there's definitely tougher things in life than traveling playing tennis, even though it is really tough. But in the end,
it's a nice way to make a living for sure.
Yeah. And even if I don't, there's all these people that believe in me, and I believe in myself, and all I can do is give the best effort I can. Right. And, that's how I make it all worth it. And if I do that, then either way, I know I'm going to come back out of tennis, with a really happy and positive experience.
Do you have a schedule mapped out for your first 3 months, 6 months, year?
Yeah. So I do have a schedule mapped out. Obviously it's, subject to change. But to start, I'm going to be going to Mexico, to Cancun, Mexico. I graduate to see how excited I am to play pro tennis. I graduate August 17th. That's my official graduation date. and I will be leaving to Cancun the next morning on August 18th. So,
wow.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I'm pretty.
So you're
I'm
taking
pretty
some
excited
summer
to
school
get out
classes
there.
this summer?
What's that?
You're taking a couple summer school classes this summer to get done?
Yeah, I'm finishing my last class this week actually. So I turned in my last assignment in 3 days, and yeah, and then one more test, and then it starts the real world.
And then you're a finance major, is that what you said?
Yeah, I'm a finance and entrepreneurship major, so I double majored.
Okay, so I have to ask you this question. As a finance and entrepreneurship major, do you have a business plan for yourself, for the business of Jimmy Bendeck?
Oh yeah, I mean, there isn't quite necessarily a business plan like that's completely laid out, but there's definitely a method to the madness of how I'm going about playing professional tennis. You know, I think, and I tell this to a lot of the people. Like, I think one of the things that I have an advantage over other people is that, you know, I'm going to treat it like a business, right? I'm going to maximize my opportunities everywhere I can. You know, whether it's going to be in fundraising or scheduling, or just really making relationships with the people that can, you know, I don't know, help me out in tennis, or I can help out. You know, I'm going to do the best I can to bring what I learned in school and in my internships to what I do here in tennis. And I think, honestly, it's going to make a huge difference. It's already making a huge difference. So maybe people do it as well as me. I don't know. And I'm just starting, right? I don't know if I'm doing everything the right way. But I'm definitely think that I have an advantage in the way that I'm trying to handle things in a more professional way off the court. So,
do you have some current professional players who are like mentoring you or who you're going to for advice?
Yeah, Coach Bolin has, has referred me to a couple players. I don't know if I want to name them, but they are extremely helpful. My conversations with them, I took down a bunch of notes and have been honestly really helpful through the process and starting this process, because obviously it's something really big and kind of scary. And it's made a huge difference. You know, just hearing them. Obviously, I can talk about the volunteer assistant coach here at Baylor has been unbelievable help. He's like Vandermeer. He played on the pro tour. You know, he was around 100 or top 100 in both singles and doubles. And he's been an unbelievable help. I mean, I can't say more about what this guy has brought to the table for me in terms of like just showing me how to be professional, you know, showing me the ins and outs of the tour, understanding scheduling, understanding, you know, how to build relationships with other players, et cetera, et cetera. It's been, honestly, without him, I don't even know where I would be. You know, and obviously my coach, Michael Woodson, Brian Bowen, the people here at Baylor have done an unbelievable job, you know, trying to prepare me as well as they can. You know, even though obviously I'm not gonna, you know, they have nothing in stake for me anymore. Obviously they're doing it out of love. So yeah, I've been pretty lucky. I have an amazing team around me that's doing the best they can to make this dream become a reality.
That's great. You mentioned your crowdfunding website, and I'd love to hear more about that, because we know it's expensive to be out there on the Pro Tour. And until you're inside the top 150, top 100, it costs money to be out there. You're not in the black yet. So how did you come up with the idea to crowdsource your financing, and how did you decide like the platform to use and all of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, originally, obviously, I originally was going to try to find one or two sponsors that were able to support me, and I wasn't able to accomplish that. So I thought the next best thing was to, you know, basically start this crowdfunding campaign. I used the Make a Champ website. It's a very sports specific website. That's the first reason I liked it, and the second reason was they take the least fees out of all the other websites. So basically, they just take like a 2% fee when you do the transaction, versus other ones do like a 2% fee for the transaction, and then there's like a 5% fee for whatever the website is. So that was why I used Make a Champ particularly. And obviously,
and we'll have a link to your Make a Champ page in the show notes for my listeners, so y'all can check that out.
Thank you. I love that. Please donate. And shameless plug.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so what, I mean, your goal on your website is pretty conservative, I think.
Yeah, it is. So that's completely based on a 1 year travel schedule. And yeah, $30,000 is you think it's conservative, but I think the people who want to support me and who'd be willing to support me wouldn't think that, right? They think, wow, $30,000 is a big number.
I mean, I'm hearing $100,000 to $150,000 a year to be out there, so I think 30,000 is conservative.
Yeah, and I think this this is part of my plan, right? Is I want to be as smart as possible in the way that I handle my traveling, right? And to handle my schedule and handle every little aspect and try to get every single advantage to make it to be as fiscally responsible as possible. And that's kind of, what I did, right? I laid out, basically I did like a pro forma expense sheet and laid out what a tournament would look like. And 30,000 was the overall number based on 30 week travel schedule. But yeah, that's the number that I landed on. And honestly, I think for doubles, I'm not going to be paying for a coach. Mostly, I'm doing pretty well with equipment. So it's really just going to be travel, hotel, and food. That's going to be taking a lot of the money. And yeah, I think for the first year, it's pretty accurate. I'll probably spend more than $30,000, but I thought it was a respectable amount, especially in the beginning when I'm proving myself, right? I think if I start proving myself and I start doing really well, then it'd be warranted for me to look for more, right? And be like, hey, look, this dream is becoming a reality. Help me get from step 2 to step 3 now.
Right.
And hopefully
you're going to have some prize money to help offset some of that.
Yeah, exactly. And hopefully, that's what happens, right? Because in the end, if you have results, I think this is something to always keep in mind with tennis. Like, if you have results, and you're doing well, you're going to make it, right? And if you're winning tennis matches, it doesn't matter, whether you get that wild card, whether you have the money to travel. But if you do well in the tournaments that you are able to travel to, and you maximize every day that you have on the court, and every match that you have, then I think then you deserve to make it, and you will make it, right? It will be a little harder than if I had a bunch of money to spend, but in the end the results will talk, and I think will lead me to wherever I want to go.
And the results will hopefully lead to sponsors as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
For sure. So I have to ask, do you have an agent at this point?
I don't. I've done all of this, obviously with the support and help from my family and coaches. But it's all through me. So everything is, every decision I've made has been my decision. And every idea has been mostly my idea, with obviously input and advice from the team that I have around me.
Do you think having something that you'll look at incorporating into your team, at some point this year? Is that a goal?
Probably not. I think that right now my goal is to have as good of results as possible. And if my results show, and if I do really well on the tour, then maybe it's something I consider in the future. But I think, honestly, short term, I don't think it's something you need, because if I'm able to travel and do well in tournaments and get to the point where, an agent would want to look at me, then that's kind of where I'd like to be at. And that kind of be where my goal would be, where I'm someone that people want. And honestly, I'm very far away from that, right? There's a lot left to be done on the tennis court before, I can really realistically be like, hey, can I get a bonus? Hey, do I really need an agent to talk to, et cetera, et cetera. And I think until my results are really showing and I'm doing really well, I don't think there's really a good purpose for it.
Gotcha. I have to ask you about your fellow college player, JJ Wolf, who also is turning pro, just made that announcement recently. And yep. Do you know JJ?
I don't know him personally. I mean, obviously I've met him, but I don't know him well personally.
Okay. I mean, so I think for our audience, it will be interesting because JJ is primarily a singles player. It'll be fun to kind of compare and contrast what's going on with your career and his career, since y'all are kind of going out at the same time. And, his path is a little bit different, given that he's not graduating from college. He's not going back for his senior year, and you are completing your degree. How important was it to you to finish your 4 years at Baylor and get that graduation certificate, that diploma?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think I had to, right? There was definitely no question
Why?
at any point of the way. Because tennis isn't forever. Well, that's one, right? And I don't think I had the results to warrant that, right? To say, hey, let me just stop here and not finish my final class. I think, I think hopefully the best of Jimmy Bendeck will be tennis, and I can make a name through tennis. But if that's not, if that doesn't happen, which there's no guarantee, then my goal is to make my name and have impact on the world. As Jimmy Bendeck, someone who did successfully academically, who is part of the business world, right? And tennis isn't forever. I know better. I think better than anyone. It can end in an instant. And so that's I mean, there's no reason. There's no reason not to graduate. At least on for me personally.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and I think, and to be honest, I think JJ, to defend his decision a little bit, I think he definitely is in a different situation than I am. Right, he's already, I believe, top 300 in the world. And that's with like almost a very limited travel pro schedule, because he's been playing college and he played, some in the fall, and I think it's a whole different world when you're consistently number one in college in singles, basically completely dominant, and already have a pretty high ranking, right? And the ability to and he has the belief in himself that he's going to make it. So I think we're not quite in the same boat. And I think he's definitely well ahead of me on his way to being a pro. So I don't know if it's quite as comparable.
I just think it's, for me, watching from the sidelines, I always get excited when a college player tries their hand at the Pro Tour. I think it's always very exciting and fun to watch. And so, to have you and JJ both embarking on your professional career kind of simultaneously, but taking different paths, it's going to be fun to watch. I'm excited.
Yeah, it's going to be super cool. Hopefully I do as well as him.
Well, he's probably saying hopefully he does as well as you. So there you go. Yeah. Do you have a timeline for yourself? Do you set ranking goals, financial goals with your tennis career?
Yeah. I mean, yes, I don't know if I've set financial goals. I've definitely set ranking goals. I'd like to be ranked definitely in the top 400 in doubles by the end of the first year. And that, maybe that's just me being as realistic and honest with myself as possible, starting, this August to probably July next year. I'd like to be top 400. And then obviously I'd like to be top 250, 200 after 2 years. And then, top 150, top 100 after 4 years. And then hopefully, really just playing ATPs after that. And my end goal is to be top 10. I think being top 10 is something that's realistic for me. If you look at my make a champ, there's a list of guys who have made it to the top 10 who had not as good of careers, not as good of years as I've had this past year in college. So it's definitely something realistic that I believe I can accomplish. And in the end, if all I can do is work as hard as I can and train as hard as I can. And attend to all the details I possibly can to give myself the best chance of playing. And then the rest is up to however, that day is on that court. I'm going to have a positive attitude. I'm going to work as hard as I can to win the match and give everything I have. And if I win, I win. And if I lose, I lose. But that's all I can focus on is what I can do each and every day to get better. And to be as mentally and physically prepared for each match as possible.
I love it. I love it. So
Yeah.
after Cancun, where can we look for you?
Hopefully, hopefully I'm going to be trying to play the Challenger in New Haven. So that's really the big one, and then most likely on the U.S. Future circuit. I'll probably be playing all the futures around Texas in the near term. I believe there's 11 tournaments on the schedule from this point to the end of the year. So not a super heavy schedule to start. Obviously, that has a lot to do with obviously being financially responsible, but also understanding that it is my first year on tour, or it is my first 6 months on tour, and that traveling is obviously super difficult. So I don't want to burn out. I'm trying to be as smart as possible about it. And then if I feel good,
go ahead.
If I feel good, I'll stay out there and play the next tournament. Right? I think it definitely goes week by week. So we'll see. I'm excited.
Yeah, I mean, building a 30-week schedule for yourself gives you time to recover, gives you time to rehab if, God forbid, you do get a little injury out there. It gives you time to recharge emotionally, to come home, see your girlfriend, see your parents, see your coach, do all those things, which is great. And I mean, we all know tennis is a year-round sport. Even at the professional level, there's a very, very short break in December before everything starts back up again, down under. So it's very difficult to schedule. And I think, going about it the way you're doing it, with planning to play 30 weeks this first year, makes perfect sense. What do I know? But from what I've read and what I've seen over the years, I think, again, that whole issue of burnout becomes very significant on the pro tour, just like it does with the juniors.
Yeah, just as much. I think just as much in the pro tour, because, in the pros, you're completely alone. At least most people are completely alone at the lower levels. So it's extremely tough.
And you're relying on yourself to make a living. I mean, you don't win, you don't get paid. So it's a very different kind of pressure than, losing a junior tennis match.
It is.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited for you, Jimmy. And, I'm really happy that we got the chance to chat, and that we'll get the chance to share your site, and hopefully the Parenting Aces audience will help you out. And I know we'll all be supporting you as you go out there and try your hand at this.
Yeah. Awesome. I appreciate it. If everyone, if donating isn't your thing, then obviously following matters just as much, right? I think that's my goal in the end as a person, is to have as much impact as possible. And I think people follow me and I continue to build a career. I think it'd be super special to have, the most supporters as possible. So,
and if people want to find you, if people want to find you on social media, I know you're on Twitter. Is that where you'll be kind of keeping up with results, sharing your results, or is there another way people can follow you?
It'll probably be mostly on Twitter. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Awesome. So we'll have a link to your Twitter account in the show notes as well, so people can start following you there.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jimmy. And to my audience, thank you so much for tuning in. We'll catch you next time on Parenting Aces.
I'm Lisa Stone, and you've been listening to the Parenting Aces podcast. For tennis parents, by a tennis parent. If you like what you've heard, I hope you'll share the podcast with your tennis community. For all the information you need to navigate the junior and college tennis journey, be sure to check out ParentingAces.com.